Well, this is Kevin Donahoe, and finally, after 10 years of prosecutorial misconduct by my own wife and professional prosecutors, I'm finally free and able to use the assistive technologies that allow me to communicate effectively even though I have a disability. And my reply to my wife's civil domestic violence charge against me is not guilty. Not guilty, it was all a lie. I was never the abuser. If you look at the professional assessment that was done, see if I can bring that up here a minute. Here it is. One of the things that will set me free is a professional who actually is an expert at determining if someone is violent or not. If you scroll down here, she asked me hours and hours of questions, but eventually came to the conclusion that I've never been violent. And you can see, says the client can be provoked, but is not violence oriented. May be impatient and easily annoyed, but they are not violent. So basically, now after 10 years, I finally have an expert witness in my defense so I can erase my entire criminal history, because all I ever did was get falsely accused by my wife for nothing more than doing what might amount to slapping her with a glove and challenging her to a duel of moral values, something that you couldn't possibly accuse me of violence because there was no injury. But it turns out that, well, of course, that only lasted 3 seconds, and it was once, and my wife, well, Susan, I'm talking to you, so I'll talk to you. You lied. It was one blow, which is so soft, like slapping you with the face with a glove. You lied and said it was multiple times, and I had basically held you down with my elbow. And you didn't tell him at all that for 6 months prior to that you were doing what's called domestic violence by economic coercion and psychological threats. I knew you were being horrible to me and the kids, basically being selfish, taking out loans, going to Hawaii and bankrupting us because you were you'd relapse with alcohol. You have alcohol addictions, sexual addictions, drug addictions, and they all were coming back because you listened to Kara and you just went into relapse on all these things that made you drop out of school when you were 13. I didn't drop out of school when I was 13. I worked hard to get a good career and stuff. I didn't have any problems. But Kara, you let Kara be a bad influence on you, and it made you relapse. What I didn't realize, though, is if you really look at the definition, which is the behavioral definition of domestic violence, the pattern includes psychological attacks as well as economic coercion. And you were doing that 6 months before October 18th, 2018, when I basically challenged you to a duel by what amounts to slapping you in the face with a glove, not any kind of violence at all. And you twisted that and said, made people believe I am some kind of a abuser, and you'd had years of abuse, which was untrue. It was you who was the abuser according to the legal or the behavioral definition of domestic violence by psychological attacks and economic coercion. So back then I knew you were falsely accusing me, and I was trying to say, don't do that because you're going to feed me to the wolves, these prosecutors who do something called prosecutorial misconduct. Let's see if I can pull that up here. It'll take me just a minute. There it is. Prosecutorial misconduct is when professional prosecutors take something like you filed on me, malicious mischief, which was me just basically asking you, do you think I have, or actually, I was actually asking the Olympia police if your sexual addictions bring somebody into the house that's like a serial killer and they go after my daughters to rape them, do I have the right to buy a gun and protect my daughters? I was simply asking the sheriff what I had a right to do, because if you remember the last time you had an alcoholic relapse, you basically went out and slept with a car salesman because you have sexual addictions, and we got divorced, and then you invited a criminal into your home named Debbie Smith, and she was a true criminal. She stole your ID, she stole your check, and in 2008 I was worried that you'd invite some worse criminal because who would actually attack our daughters. It was a very valid concern given your history. I had no history like that. I never, put my children in danger by inviting real criminals. I was never a criminal. You made me into a criminal by taking away my rights. My right was to have freedom of speech. You should have never put a protection order on me where I couldn't just talk to you and explain you're a sick person. You're a nice person, but you have sicknesses like alcohol addiction and sexual addiction. And when I visited this site called Alternative Professional Counseling, these are the people that now are expert witnesses that said I have never been violent, so I can sue people for discriminating on me by basically lying and doing defamation of character now for 10 years. I can use this for all those people that are like you, that have been saying for 10 years a lie. I can use their expert witness to bankrupt you all. And when it comes to prosecutorial let's see if I can find that again here. Prosecutorial misconduct is actually a crime. Prosecutors get disbarred and go to prison. When they do that, it is a crime. You can look at all the types of misconduct, and in your case, you failed to disclose evidence of what we were arguing about that day, just to make an illusion that I was some sort of criminal or violent person. You didn't tell people I was self-defending myself and challenging you to a moral duel because I was deathly afraid of being exposed to HIV. You just totally left that out, and then you proceeded to have me arrested over and over again on false charges that I violated the protection order. But the protection order itself is basically what I consider treason. These rights, basically, these rights right here, when you take those away from someone like me, especially someone who's disabled like me, I don't consider it just a civil offense. I'm going to ask the President of the United States to do, and governors, to do executive orders that will make it a crime where you're locked up for the rest of your life, and do it retroactively. That's right, retroactively. So basically, prosecutors who say you can't have freedom of speech to talk directly with your false accusers, or they don't give you reasonable bail, like in my case, I had no violence history, I was being falsely accused, but they said no bail. So I couldn't be out and have the assistive technologies that helped me with my disability. So I had to rot in jail for 8 horrible years because of people like you that are civil plaintiffs that essentially are also prosecutors, and you take away the right to free speech, you take away the right to due process. In that case you filed against me, there's no such thing as a trial. I should have had a trial in front of my peers where I could face you in front of them and say to you, you're a liar, you're a sick person. You need to realize you're worse than the people that beat their spouses up, because those injuries, they heal in like a month or so. What you've done to me for 10 years now is you've taken me away from my grandchildren and my children, and you and other prosecutors have made me rot in jail and prison for 8 years. Do you realize what you've done? I know people with alcoholic addictions and sexual addictions, and basically they don't realize they have a problem. Someone has to intervene. And this alternative professional counseling, they try and help you too. But basically, this sickness you have of being a domestic violence abuser by economic coercion and psychological attacks, where you use the no contact order, the protection order, to take away my free speech, to just rebuke you, and basically you took away my right to have a trial, and so did they. It's just unheard of. Like, for instance, just the simple right to have reasonable bail, that is number 8. Think about this. I had no pattern of violence, and you can see clearly that alternative professional counseling says you were lying. I'm not violent. So I should have had no bail. I should have just been free to have the technology that assists my disability, and I could have defended myself by going to trial, and it would have been all come back on you that you were lying, and you would have been forced to go into treatment. But you basically fed me to the wolves, since I was already suing governments for my malpractice by Willamette Dental. I tried to tell you, don't make false accusations on me, because once your wife or spouse does that kind of thing, then these other prosecutors and other people are just going to jump on the bandwagon and start filing false charges on me like you did. And that's what they did. Do you realize what they did? Basically, before I won the largest lawsuit in history, which is $7 trillion against you and these evil people, what they did was they didn't like being sued. They thought they could deter me. So what they did is they actually made up this story that I was around the courthouse with a gun and was stalking the people that I was suing. That wasn't true. I was up 70 miles away in Everett helping Jennifer buy a car. Can you see how they're like you? They basically make up total lies, only in this case, you lied, but I don't know how they got a probation officer, a police officer, a prosecutor, and a sheriff's officer to all lie and make up a wild story like that. For a few seconds, I thought, well, maybe it was a case of mistaken identity, because there are people that look like all of us. But the more I thought about it, it was just a total lie. So they actually made like a Hollywood movie lie, and everyone just believed it. And King 5 News and the Daily Olympian joined in that all of that lie. So they're all basically co-enablers of this thing called, bring it up here again, this thing called prosecutorial misconduct. Now technically, what you're doing is malicious prosecution, but that's not actually accurate, because when you're civilly complaining about someone, you're actually also acting as a prosecutor when you start taking away their civil rights and making false criminal charges on them, like you did me. So I think that I'm probably done now entering my reply. Let's see if there's anything I forgot. Takes me just a minute here. Well, I think I need to stay just one more time. As I sue people, including you, and send things to your boss asking them to either make you go to counseling and get treatment or fire you, basically I'm going to be asking people that have something very important that's in terms of correcting this problem, called the executive order, which means 50 governors and the President of the United States to hear what a horrible nightmare this is for not just me, a disabled person, because it was done by discrimination, but 2/3 of the people in prisons and jails have had their rights violated, and I'm basically asking the President of the United States to just end this immediately and make it a crime at a minimum that you go to. If you take these rights away from someone, like freedom of speech, the right for a reasonable bail, due process, basically you're committing one of the worst crimes possible, and the minimum sentence is the rest of your life in jail. But if you're like these prosecutors that execute at least one, and some of them execute multiple people, then they're basically serial killers using prosecutorial misconduct as their serial killing weapon. So I'm actually asking the President of the United States to say in the executive order for all 50 states that the death penalty will be something that's on the jury will decide on for these prosecutorial misconduct people, because when it happens between two people that are family, it's called domestic violence, but it is all violence. And if in my case I want lots of money, you can never give me back those 10 years away from my children or that. I want lots of money from a lot of people for what's been done to me. But the people that died in prison because they got exposed to AIDS, or because they're basically in with real criminals, and they're not criminals at all. So you basically have people that rape you, beat you, spit you in the eye, that are prostitutes, so you could catch hepatitis or anything like that. And there's people that are just beat you up. And so some people die. So some people die that are in my situation, and others are actually executed. And that's why people really question the death penalty, is these prosecutors are proven later that they knew the person was innocent, and so basically they're a murderer. And some of them murder more than one person, so they're serial killers like Ted Bundy or the Green River Killer. So I think I'm done with my reply. Basically, I'm not guilty, and I'm going to file what's called a counter complaint and sue you all and put some of you in prison, and then others certainly disbar you so you can never do this kind of thing again. But let me end by this. Susan, you have sicknesses. You need to wake up and go see the people at Alternative Professional Counseling and get help. They say they can cure people that beat their family members to a pulp because they see it as a sickness. But your sickness is even worse than that. It's 10 years of economic coercion and psychological threats using this thing that's basically treason against me, against the United States, when you take away my right to freely communicate you with a protection order. And that's been going on for 10 years now. Susan, please, your grandchildren are going to know, and your children are going to know eventually. It's going to come out that you're a sick person. They're only going to respect you if you go get help for yourself. You need to realize people with your problems have relapses and take precautions to not hang out with Kara, who just basically is irresponsible. She makes you have relapses, and you've destroyed our family that was such a happy family. It could have been such a wonderful thing, but you took Kara's advice. And I had good friends growing up. You had bad friends that made you drop out with drug and alcohol at age 13. My friends were good. Your friends were bad when you were 13, and you started hanging around bad friends when, after 26 years of marriage with Kara, and she basically was co-enabling you, co-enabling you. So she's going to be a co-defendant in my complaint that she basically is a domestic abuser and a prosecutorial misconduct co-defendant. She helped you do it.